JD Vance leaned into his mic and said it quietly, but not quiet enough. Go back to the zoo. Just 6 words. But they didn't just interrupt the moment they exploded it, the room heard. The mic caught it. The press row froze. Jasmine Crockett? She didn't blink. She didn't flinch. She simply stopped. You're watching Power Shift in real time. If you're here for the facts, hit like. Leave a comment telling us where you're tuning in from, and subscribe, because this moment didn't just spark tension. It shifted the entire conversation. It was 9:03 a.m., room 2141, Rayburn House Office Building. A federal hearing on sentencing reform. Vance was scheduled to give formal remarks. Crockett was expected to ask policy-focused questions. The agenda looked like another typical bureaucratic exchange, but the second JD Vance started speaking, everything shifted. He launched into points about absent fathers, cultural decline, and rising urban crime. It wasn't just a familiar script, it was outdated. Crockett sat near the end of the panel, notes laid out, glasses low on her nose. She had reviewed the data. She came prepared not for drama, but for a battle of facts. When it was her turn, she skipped any small talk. What came instead was surgical. Senator Vance, she began, you speak of protecting families, but your voting record shows you've opposed every significant sentencing reform bill in the last 3 years, reforms that largely impact Black and Latino families. How do you align that with your stated values? The reaction was immediate. Jaw tightened, hand gripped the table, smile forced. With all due respect, Vance replied, you're confusing enforcing the law with injustice. Crime doesn't come in a color. Responsibility isn't racial. Crockett's gaze sharpened, no raised voice. No interruptions, right? She said. So when nearly identical cases in white communities end in probation, while Black teens get 15 years for the same charges that your version of colorblind justice? Vance had no reply. Because there wasn't one that could hold his narrative. Together, there are socioeconomic differences, he finally said. But turning this into a race debate doesn't help. Crockett didn't look down. It's already about race, Senator. The data said so long before I walked into this room. She flipped another page in her binder. Do you believe federal sentencing today is fair? A pause. Too long. No system is perfect, Vance offered. That's not what I asked. He shifted, cleared his throat. It's, adequate for what we're dealing with. Crockett gave a single nod. Not in agreement, but to signal she heard the evasion. That's not policy. That's a deflection. Then it happened. The words he hadn't planned to say, but had clearly been simmering just under the surface. Why don't you just go back to the zoo? He didn't shout. He didn't sneer. He said it low, too low for some, but not for the Mike and Crockett. She calmly removed her glasses, placed them on the table, and looked at him direct, composed. Would you like to repeat that for the record? No one moved. No one breathed. Everyone understood what had just happened, and she wasn't finished. I'll ask again, Jasmine Crockett said, her tone low but sharp enough to cut steel. Did you just tell me to go back to the zoo? Vance stayed still, didn't blink, didn't look at her. Jaw clenched, shoulders locked. His eyes darted left, right toward his aides, toward the chair, toward anyone who might bail him out. Of the moment he had created, but no one moved. Because no one could. I don't think that's an appropriate line of questioning. He finally muttered. Crockett leaned in. Slowly, deliberate or not, your comment, Senator, brought us here. The energy in the room shifted, not physically, but the balance of power clearly changed. JD Vance was no longer in control. The chairman cleared his throat. Representative Crockett, let's stay on topic. I am on topic, she said calm. Steady. I'm focused on what happens when hatred is disguised as policy. When a U.S. senator addresses a colleague like she doesn't belong here, her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. The problem, she continued, is that I'm not even shocked. I'm not surprised. I've been in rooms like this before. I've heard the remarks that never make it into the record. I've seen the way people tense up, then act like nothing was said. JD Vance remained silent, gripping the table, refusing to acknowledge the tension, pretending the smoke in the air didn't come from his own spark. And you know what? Crockett said. I'm not even asking for an apology. I'm asking for honesty. Let it be recorded that when pressed on policy, a sitting senator responded not with facts but with disrespect. A quiet hush followed, papers rustled, someone cleared their throat. A reporter's fingers tapped faster than their screen could. Keep up, Crockett turned slightly, now speaking directly to the chairman. Mr. Chairman, I ask that the clerk review the transcript and isolate the senator's last remark. One moment passed, then another. The clerk looked up and nodded. It was confirmed. JD Vance still said nothing. He didn't respond, didn't meet her eyes, didn't even try to defend himself. The real issue wasn't what he said, it was his belief that he could say it without consequence. Crockett folded her hands. She wasn't angry. She was resolute. This isn't about me, she said. It's about everyone who's ever been told they don't belong. Still, Vance remained silent, still no response. And that's when it became clear this wouldn't fade away. Not with spin, not with silence, not with time. What Jasmine Crockett delivered wasn't just a statement, it was a reckoning. And everyone in the room understood, the record now bore a permanent mark. JD Vance hadn't spoken, no denial, no clarification, no damage control, and that silence? It wasn't strategy, it was surrender, because Jasmine Crockett had no intention of backing down. She wasn't going to fill the silence for him. She was going to let it speak for itself. You want to talk about crime, Senator? She asked, her voice sharp and unwavering. Then let's talk about the crime of stolen opportunity. About schools without new books for a decade. About neighborhoods with no grocery stores, clinics that can't meet demand, jails overflowing, and policies that punish black and brown kids for growing up in places you've never stepped foot in. She wasn't looking for applause. She wasn't driven by outrage. She was demanding the truth, and before she began, she added without breaking eye contact, "Don't tell me this isn't about race." Because when almost identical crimes in white counties end with rehab, but black teenagers get 20 years for the same charges, what do you call that? The room fell into an unnatural silence. No coughs, no whispers, just the low hum of air vents and the quick tapping of journalists' keyboards, trying to capture every word. Crockett calmly turned a page in her binder, composed like a surgeon. You sat on the Judiciary Committee, she said. You had full access to the Sentencing Project's 2023 report. You read it. And still, you voted against every single reform that could have corrected even a fraction of that imbalance. JD Vance's hand was visibly shaking next to his water glass. He grasped it but didn't take a sip. That's not just an oversight. She continued, that's deliberate neglect. There was no reply. So she leaned in again, her voice soft but sharp. You want to call me emotional? Fine, I am emotional. Because I've seen mothers bury their sons for less than what you've dismissed in this chamber. And you, she said, staring straight at him, you can't even say 6 simple words out loud? His eyes briefly met hers, just a flicker, a flinch. But that flinch said enough. It meant he heard her. It meant the words had landed. I've been told to stay quiet, she said. Told to be patient. That if I follow the rules, the system will eventually be fair. She paused, then delivered the sentence that shook the entire room. But I'm done politely asking for a seat at a table that was never built for me. A beat passed, then another. I don't need your apology, she said, her gaze still locked on him. I don't even want it. What I do need is for this record, this hearing, this moment, to show exactly what happens when those in power forget who they're meant to serve. Another member of the committee, Representative Teresa Hanley, a veteran Democrat with 30 years in the House, finally spoke. She has the floor, she said, calm and firm. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Jasmine carried on like she owned the room. And in that moment she did. You think this will just pass? She asked, not to Vance, but to the entire chamber. It won't, because what happened here doesn't vanish with silence. It won't fade just because it was spoken softly. It lives now in the record, in this hearing, and in every young black girl who's ever been told to shrink herself to make power feel comfortable. Vance still didn't move, and that's when the chairman finally leaned forward, voice quieter now, unsure. Let's proceed with the questioning, he said. Jasmine looked down, flipped a page in her binder, and met his eyes. Again, I will, she replied, but the truth has already happened. Everything that follows is just their attempt to cover it up? Without hesitation, she turned, seamlessly transitioning as though she hadn't just delivered a stunning blow to a sitting senator with nothing but poise and precision. Dr. Lindstrom, she said, now addressing the legal expert beside her. Let's examine the roots of mandatory minimum sentences and their racial consequences. She was back on track, but the room wasn't. No matter how the discussion moved forward, that moment had been permanently etched into the space. As for JD Vance, he wasn't engaging anymore. He was simply enduring. A clerk slid a printed copy of the exchange across the table. The chairman read it once, then again, before speaking softly into the microphone. For the record, the senator's comment has been reviewed, verified, and documented. Vance didn't react, no blink, no flinch. He stared ahead as if by staying motionless he might disappear, but Jasmine Crockett saw him, and so did everyone else. I want it time-stamped, she said. Not just the words, the pause, the silence, the refusal to be accountable. I want that in the record, too. There were no raised voices, no dramatic gestures, only composure. And that composure was shattering. Representative Grant Underhill, a Republican from Utah, leaned forward slowly. I may not agree with everything said here today, he began, measured, but we all heard it. Pretending we didn't would make us complicit? No one challenged him. They couldn't. The truth had been caught by the mic, the clerk, and the internet, which was already analyzing every second. But here's what mattered. Jasmine didn't revel in the moment. She didn't celebrate. She was the reckoning. This kind of incident isn't new. But this time, it wouldn't be brushed aside. Vance's aide leaned over and whispered something. He gave no response. No nod, no movement. Like a statue left behind. As the room marched forward, Representative Liana Chow, Democrat from Oregon, added firmly, I want it stated clearly. This committee cannot ignore racially charged remarks spoken or whispered without acknowledgement. Jasmine didn't look up. She calmly turned another page in her binder. I came here with policy, she said. With data, with legislation that can truly help our communities. She glanced at Vance briefly, surgically. But now I'm forced to defend my humanity. She shut the binder. That's not why I'm here, but it's what this moment demands. Still, Vance said nothing. Not even a denial, because the worst part wasn't just what he said. It was what he failed to say after. The chairman pressed his fingers to his temple, his voice lower now. Let's please move on with the hearing. But Crockett wasn't finished. No, she replied, let's be honest. You don't want to continue, you want to move on? You want to pretend that a U.S. senator didn't just compare a black woman to a zoo animal on national television. Because acknowledging it makes you uncomfortable. Her voice was steady, nearly quiet, but beneath it there was steel. You can't pretend civility while covering up the rot underneath. A quiet gasp came from the gallery. Phones were already out. Social media was exploding. Still, Vance didn't look up. And that silence, that absence was what people would remember, because Jasmine Crockett wasn't seeking justice. She was justice, deliberate, unshaken, precise. I'll say this once more, she concluded. I didn't come here to fight. But I won't ever let this go. Racism can often hide within the fine print of policy. She took a steady breath, glanced at her binder, and resumed reading a bill summary as if nothing had happened. The contrast was striking. While JD Vance sat, frozen in silence, Jasmine Crockett calmly took control of the room as though it had always been hers. The gavel dropped soft but definite. 5-minute recess, the chairman announced. Yet no one moved right away. The atmosphere didn't feel like a break. It felt like a verdict had just been delivered. JD Vance rose slowly as if his body needed reminding it could still move. His aides gathered around him quietly, murmuring strategies, eyes down. One discreetly placed a folded note in his hand. He read it, set it down without expression, no reaction. Number blinking, just a quiet withdrawal. Outside, the press was already in motion. Clips from the live stream were all over social media before the hearing had even paused. No commentary. No edits, just the unfiltered footage, the slur, the silence, and Jasmine Crockett's voice steady and resolute. Inside the chamber, she remained seated. She didn't check her phone, didn't glance at the cameras. She simply sat still, composed, with her binder closed and her gaze forward. She wasn't looking for applause or an apology. She was waiting for accountability. And she had all the patience in the world. When the hearing resumed, something had shifted. Not even the microphones could disguise the change in the room. "Representative Crockett," the chairman said, clearing his throat, "you may proceed if you wish." She gave no nod, no acknowledgement. She simply lifted her notes, continuing as though nothing had occurred, though everything had. "Dr. Abrams," she began, addressing a scholar in criminal justice, "your 2022 study shows that federal sentencing disparities have widened in recent years. Can you explain how policy rather than crime rates contributes to this?" Her tone was sharp and deliberate, yet the tension lingered. JD Vance could no longer hide his discomfort. As he reached for his glass, he nudged it, and the sound too loud cut through the air like a crack under pressure. Everyone noticed Crockett wasn't just asking questions. She was demonstrating composed leadership. No retribution, no emotional outbursts, just control. Every word she delivered now carried more weight, not because of what she said, but because of what she chose not to. She never referenced the slur again, never addressed Vance, never acknowledged the uproar. She didn't have to. The silence that had followed her earlier words still lingered, etched into the room, alive in every pause, and JD Vance, he wasn't just attending a hearing anymore. He stood exposed, center stage, with no script, and the nation watched him lose his footing. By the time the floor passed to other lawmakers, the tone had shifted. Their words slowed, soft, more measured, more aware. No one wanted to be the one who simply carried on, because the moment still lingered unresolved, undeniable. When the hearing adjourned, Vance didn't leave through the main exit. He slipped out a side door, flanked by aides, surrounded by silence, no press interaction, no defense, no remarks. Just a quiet exit. Crockett, on the other hand, walked straight through the front. No entourage, no theatrics, just her binder in hand and unwavering resolve. Reporters called her name, cameras flashed, microphones reached, but she didn't pause, didn't gloat, she didn't need to. The footage was already viral. The moment had already resonated. Her strength wasn't in her words alone, it was in her composure, her clarity, her control. And now, regardless of how JD Vance tried to spin the story or how many advisors edited his responses, the truth had already been captured. There was outrage, quiet, but more powerful than any outburst. The clip had already reached 12 million views before the hearing ended. No voiceover, no edits, just one continuous shot. JD Vance muttered a line. Jasmine Crockett removed her glasses and asked, calm and direct, "Would you like to repeat that for the record?" This wasn't just a moment anymore, it was evidence. In congressional offices around the country, staff gathered around screens. In newsrooms, producers dropped everything else. In campaign headquarters, damage control emails began flying. Inside the Rayburn building, the air had changed. Not just emotionally, it felt different because JD Vance hadn't just made a gaffe. He made history, the wrong kind. Reporters flooded the hallway. Not for quotes, but for fallout. But Jasmine Crockett gave them nothing. She walked straight through, no words, no pause. Not because she was avoiding them, but because everything worth saying was already on the record. Behind her, Vance's team scrambled, phones pressed to ears, texts flying to GOP leadership. Explain, clarify, spin. Say he was misunderstood, but the audio was clear. Silence can't be misinterpreted. Inside the hearing room, the aftermath was cold and procedural. The clerk stamped transcripts. The chairman sat motionless, lips tight. No one made eye contact. No one could pretend this was routine. This wasn't just a viral moment, it reshaped the room's dynamics. Crockett had achieved what no shouting match or protest ever could. She revealed the problem calmly and completely. Meanwhile, Vance stayed seated. One hand on the table, the other clenched beneath it, a third aide whispered in his ear. He didn't react. He was still trying to process what the internet had already judged, reposted, and torn apart. And every new tweet made it worse. Not because of what he said, but because of what he didn't. Why didn't he deny it? Apologize? Say anything? It no longer mattered. The optics were permanent. Crockett appeared in front of the press just once on the Capitol steps. Reporters pleaded for comment. Should he resign? Was he racist? Would she push for censure? She looked at the crowd of microphones and said simply, I want the country to hear what happens when truth meets unchecked power. I want the record to reflect not just what was said, but who stayed silent when it mattered. Then she walked away. No media tour, no TV appearances. Just a silence that said more than any soundbite ever could. Inside Senate offices, a chilling question began to spread. If this could happen to Vance, who's next? Because the game had shifted. Jasmine Crockett hadn't just won an argument, she changed the entire landscape. No shouting, no fist-pounding, just sitting still while a man's own words unraveled everything around him. By nightfall, the clip wasn't just viral, it had triggered a political quake. Headlines across every outlet read the same. JD Vance caught in racial slur. Jasmine Crockett's silence dismantles him. Every second of footage was analyzed, his clenched jaw, his grip on the water glass, the fact he never denied it. But the moment that shattered everything, Crockett's silence. No theatrics. Just a sharp edge of truth, clear, calm, and devastating. And it wasn't just Twitter that noticed, donors noticed. Senate leadership noticed. Even former allies started deleting their supportive posts. By 10:42 p.m., Vance's office released a statement. 5 paragraphs, no mention of the word zoo, no apology. It blamed a tense atmosphere, said the moment had been misinterpreted, but America had seen the clip. They'd heard the silence. No one was convinced. Meanwhile, Crockett was home. Not celebrating, preparing. The next hearing was on affordable housing, because this was never about headlines for her. It was about proving that power doesn't scare integrity. Now, she wasn't just representing her district. She was standing in for every young black woman told to be quieter. Every colleague who'd endured quiet discrimination, every voice pushed aside to maintain comfort for others. She didn't ask for this spotlight, but she owned it. JD Vance didn't just lose a debate, he lost something far deeper, the illusion that his words would go unnoticed. Because someone looked back, calm, certain, unshaken. The next morning, the Congressional Black Caucus issued a joint statement in support of Crockett. 3 Senate Democrats called for an ethics review. And quietly, GOP leadership called Vance's team. They didn't offer a strategy. Just one directive: create distance. No apology, no comeback story. Just space. Because what Jasmine Crockett had done wasn't just expose a slur, she held up a mirror. And when it cracked, JD Vance could only stand there and watch it shatter.